Yes, in today's gospel reading, Jesus tells us the story of the man leaving the country and giving his servants money to invest for him according to their abilities. And as we just heard, to one he gave 5 talents, to another he gave 2, and to yet another he gave 1, according to their talents. And the one with 5 immediately got to work. And he was involved with buying and selling, and soon he earned another 5 talents. The one with 2 also got right to work and invested the money, and he earned another 2 talents. But the one who was given 1 dug a hole in the ground and buried the money for safekeeping. When the man returned from his trip, he called his servants in to account for his talents. And when he went to the one that he had given 5 talents to, he said, "Master, I got right to work, I doubled your money, and here are 5 more talents, so now you have 10. And the master said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things, now I will put you over many things." And then the one that had 2 talents came and said, "I doubled your money, now you have 4 talents. And the master said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a small amount, now I will give you more responsibilities." But the one who was only given 1 talent said, "Master, I knew you were a hard man, and that scared me, and I went out and dug a hole in the ground and buried your 1 talent. And here it is." And the master's response was, "Get out of here, you wicked and lazy servant. I will give your 1 talent to the one who has 10. And then he had the other people take him and throw him out, and it said he was thrown out into the outer darkness. And then it says, there will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Jesus likens this parable to the kingdom of heaven. And what does it tell us? Well, first of all, we're all entrusted with gifts according to our abilities. These gifts may be talents, such as music, art, public speaking, visiting the sick, sewing, cooking, carpentry, growing things. You name it. There are all kinds of talents. Secondly, we are to multiply our gifts. We are to work with them and to use them in order to further God's kingdom. We're not to let them lie. Third, as the servants who had multiplied their gifts said, we got busy right away. As soon as you gave us this and you took off on your trip, we got busy with it. And instead of lollygagging around, we went and started investing and buying and selling and multiplying those gifts. But the lazy servant did not. It is easy to say, well, I'll get at that sometime when I have more time. But unfortunately, one of the problems is sometime often never comes. Fourth, hiding your gifts and not growing or using them is a serious sin. In our lives today, in the area that we grow up in and that we live in now, we're used to people being a little bit more forgiving than this. If somebody didn't make a good investment, we're used to saying, oh, well done for those that did, but this fellow didn't. Well, that's okay. Try harder. You'll do better next time. We're used to that kind of behavior, but that's not what Jesus said in this particular parable. He said, "You lazy and wicked servant," and then he threw him out into the outer darkness. That is really telling us how serious Jesus believes this to be for us, this charge that we have to use our gifts. Fifth, there will be a time of accounting. The Bible tells us that we will stand before Jesus and give a full accounting of our deeds, what we have done, and what we have left undone. I'm sure that several people in this congregation have had to increase their time and efforts these past weeks when you've been without a pastor. In fact, we just heard some of that this morning. Next week, your new pastor will be here, and there will undoubtedly be a feeling of relief, a letting down. But the Bible cautions us. It says we need to guard against being complacent. The Bible tells us that we need to remember the gifts and talents that we've been given and use them. In the Methodist tradition, all members of the congregation are considered ministers. Of course, there are many ways of ministering, but the pastor is not the minister. We are. We are called to be the witnesses for Christ. We are charged with doing the work of ministry, caring for the sick, the destitute, those in mourning, the persecuted, the homeless, all those in need of Christ's healing love. That is our charge according to our abilities. In the bulletin at the Beardsley Methodist Church, when we started going there, they would always have a little section where they had pastor listed, choir director listed, Sunday school superintendent, and then it said ministers, all members of the congregation. That was in every bulletin, and it was a reminder to us that that is our charge, to be ministers of the word. The pastor is your guide, your mentor, your helper, your scriptural authority, your critic, your counselor, perhaps your confessor. In other words, your leader. In the Bible, Christ is often portrayed as a shepherd. That image also suggests the pastor's role, watching over, guiding, and caring for his or her flock. Our New Testament reading from Corinthians this morning addresses the body of the church. In the human body, all parts are important, all parts necessary. The hand is not more important than the pancreas. The eye is as necessary as the foot. All are parts of the body, and so it is with the church. As we saw this morning in the children's sermon, we can't get a good cookie if we leave out some of the ingredients. We may get something resembling a cookie, but it just won't be as good. The more ingredients that are omitted, the worse the cookie is. Likewise, we are all part of God's plan. All have a part to play. We are all needed and necessary. A few months ago, I was visiting at my daughter's house in St. Paul, and Sunday came, and it was time for Sunday school. And she said, "Grandma, would you come to my Sunday school class with me?" Well, okay. And then I thought, am I going to be the only one, or do they do this at this church? Have the grandparents there? I didn't know. And so I said, "Will your mother be there?" And she said, "No, Grandma. Mommy doesn't come to my Sunday school class." And I said, "Well, what's she doing?" And she said, "Well, she goes to the service." And I said, "Oh, I see. She's participating in the worship service." And she said, "No, she doesn't participate. She just watches." I didn't tell Kim what Eleanor said, but Unfortunately, too many of us come to church and just watch. You might be thinking, well, there isn't much that I can do anymore. I did a lot when I was younger, but now I don't have the energy that I used to have. I can't get going like I used to. And all of those things are true. We had a woman in the Beardsley Church who had a stroke when she was in her 30s. And it was a severe stroke. This woman had been very active. She would go on canoe trips up in the Boundary Waters and just was a very active person. And all of a sudden this stroke hit her. She almost did not survive it. But the stroke left her paralyzed on one side. And her husband ended up taking care of her for years and years. But she said that it was very difficult for her to go from being very active in the church to having things that she could no longer do. But she said, I thought about it, and the one thing I can still do is call. So she did that. She would call to get people to serve on committees. She would call to see how people were that were on the prayer list. She would call just to check in, to see how people were doing, whether they were on the prayer list or not. And she served a very useful role in the church. One man said, well, one thing I'm good at is listening. Well, that's true. That's an important thing. Some of us sometimes need someone to talk to. We always need someone to listen to us. So if you're not able to do anything else, or even if you are, don't discount the importance of being a good listener. There is a man in our congregation in Beardsley that is a convicted felon. He's very open about this, so I don't feel that I am betraying any confidences. But he served 10 years in prison, and when he got out, he was in the Twin Cities, and he found that he couldn't find a place to rent. They would have a questionnaire, and it would ask, have you ever been convicted of a felony? And of course, he had to say yes, and then that eliminated him from a lot of places. He ended up going out to Beardsley for a funeral, and he discovered that there were some residences in Beardsley that were cheap enough that he could actually afford to buy one. And that's exactly what he did. And so when he left prison, they encouraged him to get involved in a church because they said then it would be a help to keep him from reoffending. And he started coming to our church on a regular basis. Some people were not real happy about this. When they found out that he was a convicted felon, they said, well, people are talking about us downtown. They say, first we had our treasurer run off with our funds, which we did, and now we've got a convicted felon. What are they thinking about us? I don't think we really want him here. But then the man said, I don't have any money to give to the church, but one thing I can do is clean. I will clean the church as my offering. And he has done that very faithfully, right along. And he has become an important member of the congregation. I don't think there's anybody anymore that doesn't appreciate him being part of our congregation. Yesterday, we had our gathering with the district superintendent, Lori Kantanen. She's the new one that just took over in August, and I don't know if you've met her or not, but she had an excellent presentation to our congregation. And she, of course, wanted to find out about us. And one of the members of our group said that he had just been down for coffee downtown, and then he said, I've got to get going because I've got this meeting over at the church. And he said, one of the guys said, well, what church? And he said, the Methodist church. And he goes, oh, those guys will take anybody. Well, he laughed and when he told us, but he said, and I told them, yes, we will, proudly. So that was a good response. Many of you know that I am a snowbird and I spend a good deal of my winter in Florida. And at our church in Florida, the Port Charlotte United Methodist Church, we have a community meal every Wednesday night. We usually serve between 250 and 300 people. And in order to distinguish the workers, we bought red T-shirts for everyone. And on the front it says Port Charlotte United Methodist Church, and on the back, big letters like this, it says, "Here to serve." And that way people can see, and know that, we can ask that person, or we would be able to direct them in the right direction. Then that has worked so well that we started using them for all of our community events. We have a big Christmas dinner, so we wear them there. We have a big Easter extravaganza. And these are all things for the community, not just for our church. I've often thought that we should wear them on Sunday morning as a reminder of our purpose. We are here to serve. Yes, we are here to serve, to minister, heal, and teach according to our abilities. We are all important, every one. And someday he'll say to us, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Amen.